Sociology always fascinated me, and after decades of writing books and being a professor, I was lucky to become part of a team funded by very important corporations to create a daring experiment. We wanted to know what happens when you isolate a common family from the entire world. The structure for the study was amazing, courtesy of a very high budget. We had an entire house built inside the facilities. We did a few long, meticulous interviews to select our subjects. The Smiths were a typical suburban family of 4. Father, Regis Smith, had recently lost his job. He had 2 teenagers, Maya and George, and his wife, Sandra, had never once worked in her life, so he was pretty desperate to get in. They were selected over a second family that met all our expectations because they had no other living relatives. Both Regis and Sandra were only children, and both their parents had passed. They also had no close friends, nor did their children. The sponsors urged us to believe that we saved a family from being homeless. But every time I remember what happened, I believe it less and less. Here are the most relevant parts of the log that we researchers collectively kept. We took turns surveying the subjects 24 hours per day, and in every room of the house, there were 3 8-hour shifts, each including a sociologist, a psychiatrist, and a few assistants. I may have inserted a few extra pieces of information to help you understand better the whole story. Also, we call the subjects by numbers to avoid humanizing them too much, but I'm transcribing their real names. And in time, you'll understand why. Day 1. They're all quiet and awkward, too aware of the monitoring to do anything normal. All 4 of them mostly just sit around uncomfortably. The subjects have access to the internet to keep a sense of normalcy, but since they have to be isolated from the world, they can't post on social media or comment on sites. Only use it to read news, books, and the like. Their internet use is being remotely monitored by techs related to our team, and can be terminated forever at any time if they break the rules. Day 2. Maya woke up screaming from a nightmare. The subjects are slowly adjusting. The monitor is very subtle, and the countless cameras and mics are very well hidden, so it's easy to forget they're there. Especially with your family around, I suppose. Day 3. One of the cameras malfunctioned yesterday, and I had someone go in and change it without being seen, but today, the image is all black again. It's a mere closet, and the subjects don't know this part of the house is monitoring free, so maybe there's no real need to change a second time. At least the microphone still works. To keep a sense of normalcy, we asked the adults to make a few daily tasks. Besides cleaning and cooking, they have to homeschool their kids, make a grocery list, clean a car that never leaves the garage but is constantly being dirtied by one of the assistants, and at least one of them should keep a remote job. They also have to wake up early every day like they would in the outside world. This has put a huge stress on George, who's clearly a night owl and a bad sleeper in general. Day 6. Sandra and Regis are fighting the whole time. He tried to delegate the tasks, but she called him controlling. She wants to homeschool the kids, but he says that she's dumb as a door. She offers to have a job then, but he says she's only good at household chores. Sandra's pretty hurt and mad. Day 9. Maya went to the grocery room, a separate room of the house where one of the assistants puts food and basic home supplies once a week, and spent 45 minutes talking to herself. All of them picked up this habit around day 4. The house is not big enough for them to have a lot of privacy, and everyone is bothered by each other's constant presence. This is getting interesting. Maya mumbled precisely 103 times, "It's unbearable that Dad never leaves. It's unbearable that Dad never leaves. It's unbearable that Dad never leaves." Day 16. George has been having more trouble than usual with sleeping. He moves too much in the bed, and then he wakes up tired, in a cold sweat. He loses focus while studying. Only his sister seems to notice that he has a problem. "We'll leave this place eventually, right?" the 13-year-old boy asked his older sister. "I really want to go to college one day." She says, "Sure, don't be silly." Day 23. Regis isolated himself from the family, focusing on his work. He builds furniture and wooden pieces on demand, obviously our fake demand. His work is very noisy, and it's clearly driving everyone else crazy. He's the only one who seems to be happy, or at least not stressed all the time. He and Sandra are alternating between screaming at each other and completely ignoring each other. But despite the fight, most nights in bed he looks for her in the dark. Her sighs suggest she only wants the semi-consented at best sex to end, but it doesn't seem to bother him at all. Dr. Ivano, my assigned fellow psychiatrist, thinks that he even enjoys it. Now, she clearly doesn't want him to touch her, but has no way to say no. What a scary man is Regis. I'm excited to know who he really is when the social paranoia he puts on is in shatters. I'm convinced that there's still something more, something darker. Day 38, everything was going relatively fine, I should say. Eventless, until George woke up once again in a sweat and trembling. Without notice, he simply got up, went to the kitchen, and cut his wrist. The knife was too sharp, and his hand ended up dangling from the arm, only a piece of skin avoiding that it got completely detached. Sandra was the one who found him, collapsed on the kitchen floor. She did nothing but scream, looking at a direction that she thought to be a camera. "You're killing us! You're psychos!" Maya, quite the practical one, went to the grocery room where we had always provided a good first aid kit, painkillers and antibiotics to help deal with the trauma and relieve the pain. We're not that bad. She sedated her brother, cleaned the wound, and clumsily sewed his hand back, then bandaged the whole thing. It was a decent job for a 15-year-old. I was proud of her, like God was proud after creating Adam. Day 39, once again Sandra is screaming at a supposed camera. "You need to provide medical care for my son. He needs a psychological evaluation and antidepressants." Sorry, Sandra. Point is observing your family with no contact with another human being. Besides, he's being evaluated. We just can't tell him the diagnosis. Our silence seemed to kill her inside. Pointing her finger at the wrong direction, she added, "You need to do something or I will." Day 42. Sandra tried to contact a psychiatrist online and had to be put in a solitary for a week. Her access to the internet is terminated for life. No more fantasizing about ethical males and thongs for you, my lady. Only browsing through recipes just to realize in the next grocery day that one ingredient will always be missing. After all, we have to keep normalcy. Minor annoyances happen every day. She keeps screaming at us. How long will you keep us here? 6 months? A year? I can't stand another week in this hell. Day 48. Regis was cranky and borderline abusive with his kids the entire week. This is the first time he addressed us. "How am I supposed to not fuck for a week, you sick fucks? Are you enjoying my misery? This crap is over. I want to give up. I'll contact my lawyer." But he never did. He may have power over his wife, but he can't do shit to us, and that makes me smile. We don't enjoy human misery, Regis, but we enjoy yours. Besides, he's our most interesting subject. Day 49. Sandra was hysterical for the week, but calmed down once Maya went to the grocery room and brought a fair amount of booze. We only give them alcohol on special occasions. Christmas was coming up. Cigarettes and drugs were strictly banned. Sandra kept all the alcohol for herself, demanding that her daughter keep it a secret from the boys. Her addiction made it easier to get through the next month. Too bad for her that the stock had ended. Day 26. George tried to end it all by setting the house on fire. Our fire alarm is very good. Beside a few second-degree burns on his former good hand and a wet house, nothing happened. He claims to miss a girl named Karina. We imagine that she's a school crush. Sandra started to change. She sent Regis to sleep in his small workshop. He slapped her on the face so hard that she was bruised for a week, but she didn't back off. He was too surprised to do anything else before she shoved him out of the door. You can see that this man is very used to resorting to physical punishment to get what he wanted from the weaker, and the only reason why it took this long for us to see him in action was that his family already knew better and did everything to avoid his fury. Day 70. Sandra told Maya, "We girls gotta stay together." Maya's not interested in being anybody's ally. She seems to do better alone. We had to change the closet camera again because George has been spending more and more time there. Now instead of static, all you can see is darkness, a reddish darkness, like when you close your eyes in a sunny day. Should probably put one camera out of the closet, but facing it. Maya asked who is Karina, but George won't answer. Day 73. George is gone. Yesterday, all the cameras in his room malfunctioned. You could only hear sounds. He was talking alone. We're sure of it, because all the others were being seen in different rooms, but he was distressed, like someone having a heated argument. "No, I won't kill Dr. Sharton," were his last words. Before a loud series of bangs started, Maya rushed up to his room and screamed, "No, George, please, please, stop hurting yourself, please, please." You could hear her loud crying as her parents approached the room. The cameras went black. Then back to normal, except for the one in the closet, and George. It was a dreadful sight. His whole head was ripped open with blood and brains staining the closet door, the floor, and his sister. He was barely recognizable as human. Looked like a pumpkin ran over by a truck. He banged his head so strongly, Maya said. He killed himself in an awful way. Awful, awful way. For the first time since the experiment started, I grabbed the only microphone that could be heard inside the house. "Lock yourselves in rooms immediately. We are removing George." George isn't dead. See, to this day, he is still in a coma. Like a living vegetable, which is much worse. It would have been merciful if he died, but he didn't. There's a chance he's enduring all these years still conscious. After this major incident, we wanted to shut down the experiment, free the remaining subjects. The whole team wrote a manifesto containing details of the horrifying events so far, but it only made the bigwigs want to keep the experiment going more. They were very interested in the results. Monsters. And I, for one, am a monster by association. I stayed. My career would be ruined if they released information about my participating in this unethical project, and I was too deep into this to not see it through to the end. Day 80. It's fascinating to see how humans deal with mourning. Most of us need to be let alone 90% of the time we spend grieving, but the 10% of interaction with other people and feeling their support is crucial. Without it, you fall apart. George wasn't dead, but everyone could comprehend that he might as well be. There was no optimism with his recovery, and the overwhelming feeling of hopelessness tore the family apart. Maya locked herself up even more. She spent the whole time keeping her mind busy and active, mostly reading. She used to play the piano ever since she was a little girl, but we purposely didn't put a piano in the house. She started to compose songs using a website that emulated a piano, and back then smartphones weren't common, so the subject didn't have a phone, it's just a computer. I smiled. She was strong and resourceful. It pained me to know that she was never leaving this place alive. "How long do you intend to keep us here? 6 months? 1 year?" Sandra's words stuck with me, because I couldn't tell her an answer, one that I knew by heart. This was the cruelest part of our experiment. There's nothing to look forward to. We're keeping you here forever. Until every last one of you dies. Day 83. Regis punched and smashed all his handiwork. The food will be very scarce next month, unfortunately. By destroying the commission pieces, Regis didn't earn enough money to afford feeding all of his family properly. Normalcy. Day 88. For a while, the remaining subjects tried to behave as a family, but But as soon as something didn't go as expected, they exploded in rage and tears. Regis and Sandra physically fought, and Maya had to choke her father with her bare hands until he passed out. "I thought he was going to kill you," she offered to her shaky mother, then locked herself in her room. The peace had lasted a mere 2 days. Day 97, just like George, Sandra had been talking to someone that's not there, and they're fighting. She doesn't eat anymore. Regis and Maya fought over what little food they could get that week. None of them seemed concerned with Sandra. She's too weak for this. She's better gone. Maya repeated this 103 times. Day 107, Sandra lost a lot of weight and isn't sleeping. She just walks in circles around the room, calling for George and arguing with an invisible being. Her broken mind seems to have regressed to her son's childhood. She keeps baby talking with him. She giggles and coos too. It's a little sad. Maya took upon herself cleaning George's room. She had removed the extra gore earlier, but only now really took the time to go through his things. Maybe understand why he took his life in such a brutal way. She found a whole notebook filled with the words, "Don't go into the closet." The writing gets more and more desperate, until you can barely decipher his words. She didn't go into the closet. Day 106. Sandra used the last of her strength to gouge out her eyes with 2 spoons. The woman begged to be left to die, and neither her husband nor daughter dared to stop her. They clearly weren't against it. I have to praise Sandra for her creativity. After George's first attempt, we removed all the knives and potentially piercing objects from the house. It made everyday life a nightmare because they weren't allowed to own a single pair of scissors and could only eat with spoons, their hands. Speaking of eating, still not enough food. Maya's rationing hers wisely. Regis is a mess. I'll be joining Karina now. She was George's twin sister. You don't remember her because you were a baby too, but she died on her first days. Your father accidentally let her fall from the bed. These were Sandra's last words for Maya. Day 111. Maya keeps telling herself, "Don't go into the closet," and shivering. She wrote it too, but not as many times as her brother, and nowhere near as desperate. Under the last time, she added, "There's a presence there. Something brown and evil." The camera inside the closet still doesn't work. The camera pointed to the closet malfunctions constantly, with no apparent reason. They get normal whenever you put them somewhere else. Day 116. We removed Sandra's body the same way we did to George. Then, today, we symbolically put a cross in the garden. I'll briefly explain that the house is completely inside a building, but they have a small winter garden with tall plexiglass to let the sun in. Maya found it eerie to have a graveyard in her own house. She keeps busy. She's composed enough to learn things and is teaching herself Japanese. Regis keeps calling for Sandra. During the night, he goes to their old bedroom door and knocks desperately until he falls asleep on the floor. Thing is, the door is unlocked and open. Day 223. Regis lost touch with reality. Now he knocks on Maya's door and thinks it's Sandra whenever he sees his daughter. She's been locking him out during the whole day as he keeps screaming and crafting the wood pieces to make money and feed herself. She's been feeding her father with the bare minimum to survive. Dr. Ivanov thinks she doesn't want him to survive, but still can't find the courage to let him die. Having to take care of someone gives her purpose, and while annoying and demanding, it's better than being alone. Day 225. It's Maya's 16th birthday. We sent in a beautiful cake. She bitterly laughed and accused us of having a twisted sense of humor. She gave Regis a small piece, and he went hysterical, refusing to eat. He thinks Maya is dead, and Sandra is delusional. Day 234. Maya was doing well until today. Regis is malnourished, and his sclera is bloody red, protruding veins. I think he went blind. But he still somehow had the strength to free himself from the 3 locks and find Maya. She was in George's room, trying to analyze his computer to get some answers about his death. We still don't know how. It happened in a matter of seconds. Like it was some unknown force. Regis broke into the room and tried to force himself on his daughter, still thinking it was his wife. The human in me didn't want to watch. The human in me wanted to interfere. But the sociologist, thirsty for a peek at the darkest of his mind, watched. Maya was taken by surprise, which gave Regis the upper hand, but in a few seconds she was able to recover. She had been eating and sleeping properly, and we knew that she was strong enough to literally squeeze his neck to death, but she didn't do it. She shoved him in the closet and locked it. Day 235. We keep hearing Regis's screams on the closet's microphone. It's maddening. He's begging to be killed, and you could hear faint noises of skin and hair being ripped off. Please. Someone free me from that. Please. 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 Day 236. The screams have stopped after 45 hours. On the first 5 hours, Regis screamed, "I'll get Dr. Shanton for you. Let me go. Let me go, or please just kill me. Just kill me. Just kill me. It hurts so much." It was always the same words, growing more desperate every time they were pronounced. The next 2,400 minutes, he could only babble incoherently and cry. Maya locked George's room from the outside, barricaded it, took all the food to her room, locked her door, and made a second barricade. She's scared. We're trying so hard to focus. So hard. Day 237. I'm a mess. We're not supposed to keep a personal log here, but I want to report it. It's relevant. It's relevant to the experiment. Yesterday, after leaving work, Dr. Ivanov took his life. He'd been quite disturbed by Regis's screams. Obviously, I mean, we all were. He was usually the colder one in the team. Today, shortly after hearing the terrible news, I found a letter in my pocket. It was signed by him. I used to think of myself as a brilliant man that could comprehend the human mind better than pretty much anyone. Maybe I am, but you know what? Is Joseph Mengele remembered for being a brilliant doctor that brought countless advances to medicine despite it being thanks to his cruelty and willingness to perform experiments that caused awful suffering? No. He was remembered for being a Nazi. That's what he was, above all. I, too, am in the first place a monster. I hope there is no afterlife because I fear the punishment for passively watching the human mind fall apart. You're a good man when we met, Melvin. I hope you still find this man inside you. Andrei. Day 1028. She's still here. Once again, after Andrei Ivanov's suicide, we researchers begged to end this madness, but the sponsors would hear none of it. Unless, of course, we were willing to pay for every penny we spent on this project and a substantial fine for breaking our contract. At least Maya never does anything out of the ordinary. She never went to George's room again, and after a respectful amount of days, she moved to the master room. She's been really good with the craft work. Her cooking skills clearly improved, and now she knows conversational Japanese and German, and even started working out. It haunts me how strong her will is. If Dr. Ivanov was here, he would joke about wanting to open her brain to study. I should feel thankful that my job now consists of watching a young woman living on her own until the end of time, but I can't stop thinking about everything that happened. I close my eyes to sleep and I see George's smashed head. I look at every woman and can perfectly picture her scooping her eyes out. Every day, all the time. Day 1092. Now that Maya's of age and working really hard, we decided to make her a nice surprise. She'll live on her own forever, so we thought she might as well have a little fun alone. We let a few female pleasure supplies go into the grocery room. I swear to God, we weren't trying to be gross or watch her in a creepy way during the experiment. We heard all 4 members of the family masturbating, the parents having sex. These experiences were disgusting, and we were more than happy to know that they always did it under the sheets. And well, she went to the grocery store, she saw the dildo and things of the sort, and she laughed for a whole hour. A literal whole hour. Her face was red, her hair was messy. She was tearing up, her legs were shaking so hard I was genuinely afraid that Maya was gonna burst. "Guys," she yelled, clearly addressing us, "you know what? I've lived all these awful days without once complaining or freaking out. I took care of my good-for-nothing parents. I fixed my brother's damn amputated hand. It was gross, so gross." She paused to wholeheartedly laugh a little more. I learned fucking Japanese and fucking woodwork, and I was good at it. Things I have no interest at all. Just to keep myself sane. Just to keep myself sane. Just to keep myself sane. She repeated that last phrase 103 times. This is a clear dissociation episode, the new psychiatrist in my team remarked. I currently know him for way more time than I knew Ivanov, but I refuse to learn his name. I refuse to acknowledge his existence. He's just an annoying voice to me. I can't handle feeling like shit again when he eventually jumps off a bridge. But you're never letting me out. Never. I'll never date someone. I'll never marry. I'll never go to college. I'll never do anything but be a creepy show for you guys. So you know what? Let's make it creepy. Let's make it creepy as fuck. Day 1093. We broke her. We broke Maya. Someone I grew to admire and even feel affection towards, and we did it. We did it by trying to be nice. She's masturbating nonstop. She's trying to break her body too, now that her mind is shattered. Today, Maya Smith stood motionless in her bed, still with her dress lifted, still with no underwear. The first thing I felt was relief because the family experiment was finally over. I said the assistants could go home. The new guy and I decided that we were going to go in and fetch her lifeless body. I turned all of our equipment off, smiling for the first time in over 3 years. The new guy leaned over her to check if she was actually dead. She wasn't. You see, Maya Smith developed a bold plan to escape. She started to craft a wooden knife in plain sight. If no one reprimanded her, she knew that she could count on at least one of the watchers. See, this watcher was me. I've been watching her alone since our new guy sucks and barely does his job, and the assistants are only required when I need to take notes or keep track of multiple screens at the same time. Maya was counting on the fact that the researchers had been as bored as her by now, and that we were probably getting pressed into keeping the study going. As soon as he leaned over her body, Maya quickly stabbed the new guy in the belly as he approached her. He coughed up a lot of blood. I ran in his direction to help him, and whoops, I let the subject get away. Cameras were off. No one else from the project was in the building. The security guard didn't know her. She was free. She was free. She was sane. After putting on a very convincing show. This is the first time I was able to properly breathe since the family experiment started. There are many reasons why I'm writing this suicide letter. First of all, I want to let someone know about the vicious experiment. In the second place, I know they'll get me for letting her go. They can't prove I did it on purpose, but they'll know. They'll always know. I decided to help Maya after I made up my mind about that, about the suicide. My sons are both adults, forgetting of their old father these days. My wife died a few years prior to the project. I'm fine knowing I'll barely be missed. She, on the other hand, is so young and determined to keep living. How could I deny her that? Just let my own death go to waste. And the third reason is, as you know, I'm Dr. Shandon, the one the brown evil presence in the closet has been claiming. I love you, son. Don't blame yourself for not giving this old man more attention. I know you thought I was doing better than ever and nothing you could do would have avoided my death, and, well, I wrote a whole different letter for you, David, because I think you're better off not knowing for your own safety. Keep everything a secret. I just have one last favor to ask of you. If a woman named Maya Smith ever looks for you, please help her. Whatever she needs, you'll be helping your old father. Love, Melvin Shanton. November 20th, 2013. This week, my older brother Saul was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He asked to talk privately to me and decided to tell me his last secret. He got a very different suicide letter from our father back in 2013, entirely transcribed above. And, I'm David. I've been married to a woman I love with all my heart since 2015. Her maiden name... Maya Smith.
So, tell me more about your family. Dr. Shanton crossed his legs and smiled politely. We're very happy and normal, Dad lied, because he really wanted to be chosen for the stupid study. My kids are the best. Never give me any trouble. He made us wear our good clothes. George even had a ridiculous boy suit on, with shorts instead of pants. I remember walking through the beautiful and long white marble corridors that led to the interview room, and how Dad had threatened us to have awful things happen at home if we didn't behave properly. That if we still have a home, Mom muttered in an unpleasant tone, her mouth in a fine line. Your dad can't find another job. I always knew that our family was very far from happy and normal, but lately, memories have been flooding back. Memories from my childhood. There's no way I'll ever remember Karina, but I remember finding a note among my mother's belongings when I discovered I was a girl and hence absolutely had to use my mother's makeup. At the time, I thought nothing of it. It was a scrambled old paper and my dad's unmistakable ugly calligraphy. I'm sorry, Sandra, but that baby had something evil. As far as I can remember, George always had a scary imaginary friend. According to him, it was a brown bear with huge jaws that lived in the closet and protected him from monsters. As his older sister, I thought it was cute, his way to cope with fear of the dark. He was being a brave boy. Dr. Shanton asked a lot about our extended family. Now I know that his team wanted to make sure we wouldn't be missed. Both our parents unfortunately passed, my mother answered, simply. I never met Dad's parents, but I remembered my other grandmother faintly. Grandma Ada Green, my mother's mom. She died after spending a few days at our house. I was around 6, but I can remember that week clearly now. I remember it so clearly my head hurts. I can almost smell the bitter coffee Mom made her when she was at our house. Our parents put George's bed in my room, because we didn't have a spare bedroom for guests. Grandma Ada stayed at the young boy's bedroom, all painted cerulean. It was the only room in the house that had a walk-in closet. She died after falling from the stairs and snapping her neck. I never saw her body or knew how she really passed until I read the necropsy report years later. I was always a curious brat. Grandma was already too old and frail, so her death was considered accidental. Since my mother, her only daughter, inherited nothing but debits, there was no reason to suspect foul play. Does your family have some kind of secret, Regis? Dr. Shanton asked jovially. Once you're there being monitored, we'll find out anyway, so you'd better tell me now. I really liked Dr. Shanton from the moment I saw him. I met all the other scientists and they were cold. Almost rude. When I came up with my plan to escape, I prayed that it was Dr. Shanton on watch. No, sir, no secrets, Dad responded abruptly. My mother frowned so hard she looked 90 years old. We had a child that didn't make it, she added, but it was a long time ago, and those things happen, right, Doctor? Of course, madam. I'm sorry for your loss. Dr. Shanton was proper in his response, but now I can tell he was eager to know more about Karina. He just had this look. David looked at me the same way when his brother revealed the suicide letter. No incidents of that sort happened for years after Grandma's death, but Dr. Shanton had too much interest in my dead sister. I think that's what brought her back. And yes, it's irrational, but I think the thing in the closet is partially George's imaginary bear friend and partially Karina. It was our 5th family member, and it followed us to our new house inside the facility. My dad wasn't a good man, but I'm inclined to believe that he killed his baby daughter on purpose, because he saw her as a twisted and demonic child. Sure, maybe he was mentally ill, but maybe not. I know that'll sound ridiculous to you, but I never told anyone about the whisperings I heard coming from George's bedroom when we moved to the facility at the start of the experiment. On day 2, I woke up screaming. I told myself I was having a nightmare, but I know I wasn't. I could hear it clearly. It was a voice like none I'd ever heard. A grave voice mixed to a child's voice. Like a lot of different voices were one and the same. I hate Dad. Why would he kill me? I wanted to protect George, but now I hate him. If only one of us could live, it should be me. Besides, when the assistants tried to remove Dad's body, they found the closet completely empty. After I escaped, I wanted to live a normal life as soon as possible. I got myself a retail job, which didn't require a background check, and worked my ass off on double shifts to finally earn real money and buy myself basic stuff. I visited a childhood friend that luckily still lived in the same address. Everybody at school and people that knew us thought we had simply moved to another state, and when I told her I had a few problems, she insisted I stayed with her until I found a proper place for myself. My friend was very discreet and never asked me about what happened. Soon I was able to pay for my own rent and moved to an apartment shared with a few other girls. I reported my legal documents as stolen, and after proving that I was in fact Maya Smith, finally I could get my identity back. I saw no point in trying to change my name. It would only raise suspicion about me. I opted for altering my hair and a few aspects of my face and simply leading a quiet life. I was able to locate George and finally allow the hospital to put him out of his misery. I was sad when I learned of Dr. Shanton's suicide, but I thought that maybe now, with 2 casualties in the team and all the other subjects dead, they would leave me alone as long as I didn't spill the beans. I was right. I had learned a lot of useful skills during my time in the facility, which gave me the confidence to apply for better qualified jobs. Mere few months after my escape, I got a really nice job as a bilingual front desk clerk at a local hotel. I'm still in this job, but I've been promoted. And that's how I met David. He was organizing a bachelor party for a friend, and I was to help him because he had a German friend coming. David was insanely attractive and had kind eyes. Eager to finally live my life, I'd been dating here and there, but it's nothing serious. He was the first and only person I fell in love with. When I saw David's reservation at the hotel restaurant, my heart skipped a beat. Shanton is not a common last name, so I knew he was somewhat related to Dr. Shanton. the man I owed my life to. I considered it a fun trick of destiny and decided to get closer to David. Not because he was a Shanton, but because I couldn't take my eyes off of him, and his family tree sounded like a good omen. I've read all your comments regarding the letter, and I want to thank every single one of you for rooting for me and worrying about my well-being. David can't keep secrets from me, and I didn't talk about my past with him for obvious reasons, but when Saul revealed Dr. Shanton's secret, it was time. Everything is fine. We're happily married for years, and for those who asked, we don't have kids yet, because I want to take this part slow, but I adore Saul's sons, and probably someday will feel ready to be a mother. The experiment wasn't that bad for me. The only thing that pissed me off was that my dad signed a specific clause that didn't unbind me, or George, in case he was alive, from the contract even when we hit 18 years old. Sure, the deaths of my family were very hurtful, but I'm not traumatized enough that I can't function as a proper human being anymore. I know a lot of people went through worse than I did, and the only rational thing I can do is live a good life. I think my parents went crazy from the isolation because they considered themselves to be captives and the researchers to be enemies, and more importantly, because they both hated being alone with themselves. I never saw it this way. That was my current living situation, and I should make the best of it. Sure, sometimes I freaked out and repeated the same thing 103 times until I got it out of my system and felt mentally stable again, but that was it. It's normal to vent. Most of the time, I always hoped to bore the researchers to death and be released, and that's one of the things that kept me sane. I was looking forward to a future. Poor George was scared and probably haunted. Mom was always weak-willed, and Dad spiraled in his madness. None of them could see a future. None of them could do it even before we were isolated, if I had to guess. Reading Dr. Shanton's suicide letter, I noticed how I was depicted as a cold teenager at first, but he grew to admire me. Truth is, I don't consider myself to be cold, but I don't miss my parents all that much. They weren't great people, and I did my best to tolerate them and keep them alive. But I really miss George. He was a sweet boy, and I'm glad you guys noticed that too. I'm happy that he can be remembered that way by so many people. I hope that I was able to fill a few gaps left by Dr. Shanton's letter with my account of the events. I just have one last thing to tell you. Something I try not to think about, and something I've never told my husband. Sometimes I hear scratches on our closet door, and I swear I can listen to Dr. Shanton's voice. He's screaming and begging. Whenever I approach the closet, the sound stops.
Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you all thank you so much for listening to tonight's story, or watching tonight's story if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, that means you're probably on the podcast that's available on iTunes, on the Google Play Store, and is now actually available on Spotify, and doesn't use as much data. So, hey, that's a thing. If you guys aren't listening on YouTube or Spotify, then I have no idea how else you could have found me. Unless you found one of those books on Amazon. You know, the CreepyPasta Collection Volume 1, Volume 2. Those are things too. Oh well, I don't know how you would have heard me there, seeing as this was recorded like 2 years after those came out. Well, anyway. Thanks for listening, folks. And sweet dreams.